World War II ended decades ago, but the echoes of the pain of the thousands of souls who died at the hands of German concentration camp guards can still be heard today. Thousands of harrowing stories from survivors make one wonder about life and death. More horrifying is how many stories we will never hear. Tens of thousands of children and women tortured to death were taken into oblivion by war. The Third Reich established 26 large concentration camps and over 1,000 smaller camps where prisoners were held. Between 1933 and 1945, approximately 2.4 million people passed through them. Approximately 1.8 million, about 74%, died there. Girlfriends were jealous. You have brown eyes, they won't take blood. The story of Tamara Skelikova from the Bryansk region, who managed to survive the most difficult stage in her life. Tamara Skelikova told us that during the war she lived in Russia in the Bryansk region, bordering the Chernihiv region. Her father was a forester in Bryansk forests, and from the first days of the war he was taken to the front. Mother was left with 7 children, the eldest of whom was 12 years old, the youngest 3. An old woman lived with them in the forest. The Nazis forced everybody out of the forest, so they wouldn't have to help the partisans. Subsequently, all the villagers were driven out of the village and the village was burned. The peasants were driven on foot in the heat without water or food to the railroad station, where they were put into freight cars and taken to Brest. As it turned out, the destination was the Alytus concentration camp in Lithuania. It was a terrible concentration camp. We lived there in some barracks, a former stable, sleeping on bunks, without straw or hay, on wires. The children cried, "Mama, give me bread." We were given a bucket of some balda per family with husk floating in it, a woman tells. And there are many such stories. Alexander Nikolaev, a Gestapo prisoner, said they were kept in custody for 3 months and were mocked. Alexander Nikolaev was 2 years old at the time, but in front of his mother he was hung upside down and beaten by the Gestapo so that she would testify about the partisan detachment and her activities. The man says he survived thanks to God's mother. I was shot together with my mother and aunt. Recollections of a Gestapo prisoner from Saratov. When the Germans shot us, out of 70 people I was the only one left alive. My mother and aunt fell on top of me when they were shot. The Germans who shot us left the yard, and the 4 policemen were ordered to throw the bodies of the dead into the pit. When they started taking my mother and aunt off, I shouted, "Mama, Mama." I am grateful to the Mother of God that one of the policemen was connected to the partisan unit. He says to those 3, "Why throw a living child into a pit? Let's exchange him for lard and moonshine." I know a woman who has no children, and will make money, said the former Gestapo prisoner. So they hid him and then sent him to a partisan unit, and that's how he stayed alive. By the time he was 10 years old, he was dreaming that the Nazis were skinning him alive and screaming at night. The paramedic who treated the boy was later shot by the Nazis because they found out that the boy was alive. They wanted to bring him back in order to force his father, who was then fighting in a partisan unit, to surrender voluntarily. Hundreds of thousands of terrible mockery and senseless taking of lives are forgotten posthumously along with the people who died in the concentration camps. It is our duty, as people of the new generation, to prevent such treatment of the human race by any nation, and to suppress any encroachment on life and peaceful existence.